For the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, we are live and amplified. So let's get ready to podcast.
Fire it up.
Welcome, everybody, to another live and amplified livecast. I'm your host, Tom Quiet, and we are coming at you again live from Waco, Texas. And my very special guest is coming live all the way from Oakland, California. Her name is Marika Petrie from the band Girl Swallows Nightingale. How are you doing today, Marika?
I'm doing okay. It's not the greatest week for anyone anyone really, but yeah. But I'm doing good today. So.
Now, have you had to cancel any shows yet this week, or have you been pretty safe?
Yeah, we actually just decided to postpone our album release concert, which was scheduled to happen next Saturday. And so we've decided to postpone that. We're actually just preparing the announcement and stuff to go out this weekend.
Okay.
So that's one thing. But that's a show we it's not like the music disappears or anything. It's more just we're all just kind of feeling sad for a lot of our friends who have lost so much income and business, and kind of a sad week in a lot of different ways, not just money, obviously.
Yeah, and just like it all started with South by Southwest getting canceled, and then it was just kind of a domino effect from there. It seemed like, at least.
Yeah.
But like I was mentioning before we got started, I don't want to focus too much on the negative. Let's talk about you a little bit. What's kind of your background? What got you into music? What's your origin story, so to speak?
Well, music has just been a part of my life since I was a baby, because both of my parents are musicians, and we always had music in the house. We always had instruments in the house. Both of my brothers are musicians as well. We've just always had music. And I started playing cello in orchestra in fourth or fifth grade, and then kept playing it through high school. I did choir, and I kind of did it for fun, really. It was just a part of life, and I didn't really take music seriously, as something that I wanted to do professionally, until maybe midway through college.
Nice. And then who are some of your musical influences?
Let me see. I have so many. Honestly, growing up, I wasn't allowed to listen to a lot of stuff, or have TV. Not that I just couldn't listen to a lot of popular stuff. My parents are more on the conservative side, and so I would listen to a lot of instrumental music, whether it's jazz or classical, or I also listened to a lot of music in other languages, because no one knew what the lyrics were, so I couldn't get in trouble for them or anything. So I listened to, I really love West African music. I love Malian music. I love listening to languages, other languages, and just how vocalists from different regions in the world sing. Huge fan of Bjork, huge fan of Fatoumata Diawara. again, really different singers. Also a big fan of Ozzy Osbourne. I've always been drawn to his unique sound and how haunting it is.
Yeah. Actually, I was actually shortly before we jumped on here, I was watching when the last solar eclipse happened. There was a concert that was happening in southern Illinois where Ozzy Osbourne was playing during the eclipse, and he played Bark at the Moon.
Oh, wow.
During the eclipse, and like there's a bunch of cell phone footage that somebody gathered and kind of mashed up like this compilation that actually synced up almost perfectly. Like everybody had their cell phones up and they were at different parts of the performance, I guess you'd say. And it was
Wow.
yeah, it was just a really interesting performance given what he was singing and what was happening on the outside.
Wow, that sounds really cool.
Yeah. But how do you think, or how is being exposed to music from all across the world, because you said you like West African music and then like just all the different types of music across the world, how has that helped mold the type of musician that you are now?
Honestly, like my brain, it's hard for me to like go it to analyze my own music. I feel like sometimes when I'm analyzing my own work, it can sometimes shut off the creativity a little bit, whereas I can analyze other people's work easier. Just because you start judging yourself so much when you really start analyzing your own work. But I do think that as a singer, I've studied multiple languages and speak other languages, and I think as a singer, it's definitely influenced like my approach to how I sing, how I approach a song, how I change my vowels, and just kind of explore the how the sound is coming out. I think that's influenced me a lot just subconsciously. And it's challenged me to try and find different ways of producing sound, just because I love hearing like what vocalists can do and how their phrasing might be and their breathing might be in other languages. So that's one influence.
Gotcha. Perfect. And what's your creative process like when you sit down to write music? Like, what's that process kind of like?
Ooh, I feel like I actually write a lot of music while I'm walking. And I don't have a car. Actually, I take public transportation. I try to find time to walk because there's something about just the rhythm of it that I almost always accidentally come up with some kind of melody or just something, and then I'll just kind of record it into my phone and come back to it later. So that's one thing I really try to I'm just always humming things and walking. And another one is like I really I come from like a story point of view, so I might be just, what is the shape of something that I want to make, or what is the emotion that I'm going for, as opposed to like, okay, I'm going to try this chord structure. I kind of like will have like try to tell a story and then see what comes out of that. I'm multidisciplinary, so sometimes I'll be inspired by visuals first, and then I might write music to the visuals, or I'll make music and then that'll inspire some visuals, and then it just kind of like goes in this circle back and forth. So I sort of make them both at the same time, and that tends to be a lot more productive for me than to just isolate like types of art mediums.
Gotcha. Understood. And so you'd mentioned, or just mentioned, that you had to reschedule the album release show that you were going to do next weekend. But the album's already released, technically, correct?
Yeah, the album itself is released. People can find it on any streaming platform. It's also on Bandcamp. Um, yeah, the album is out there, and this was going to be like our release party, our release concert. And like I said, it's a multidisciplinary project, and I've had all these. The show is going to have and is going to have in the future all of these tactile elements and visual art that me and a big team have created to go along, and it just kind of shares more about the album's characters, about the story, and there's more entry points into the album because of all the visual and storytelling elements in the
Gotcha.
show.
So
Yeah.
I take it you specifically wrote for the album. Is that kind of fair to say?
What do you mean specifically wrote for the
Like,
album?
like you wrote, you knew going in you wanted like 12 songs or how many ever there, 8 songs, and you wrote each song knowing it was going to go into this specific album versus just writing songs to write them and then picking from a pool of songs. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Definitely. I didn't know exactly how many the final album would have, but I knew for sure that it was going to be a concept album. I didn't want it to be like too kind of brainy or intellectual. I wanted not that kind of a concept album, but it definitely, I knew that there was going to be all of these other elements to the storytelling than just the music. So, yeah, I wrote it I didn't necessarily write it in order. It's just like a process of discovery and being like, oh, that's where this should go, or that's where this should go. But I knew for sure it was going to be a concept type of album.
Gotcha. And when
Yeah.
you were, because I'm always really interested in the process of how musicians do things. It's just something I'm really into. So what was the process when you were ready to start working towards this album? What was going into the studio, because this was the first time you'd been into the studio, correct? Or in a studio?
It was my first time with this band. I've
Okay.
I've actually been a musician for a long time, and I've I've recorded on albums with other groups. I actually spent 7 years with another band called Mad Noise, another Oakland band, and we made a couple, we'd done a lot of studio sessions. Yeah, and this band, Girl Swallows Nightingale, actually came out of me just feeling like, you know what, I've been a musician, like a professional musician for a long time. I've been on other people's records. I have a lot of my own music inside of me. Like I need to make time for myself to make my own music. So in that way, going into the studio, I felt like really, really nervous and excited and vulnerable because it was, it's like my songs. But at the same time, I felt pretty like comfortable and prepared because I have been a studio musician and I knew exactly which engineers I wanted to work with. I knew, what kind of vibe I wanted to set in the studio. I'm just comfortable in there. So in that way, it felt like I was glad that I had, had experience with other groups prior to like making my first record. Yeah, so going into it, yeah, it was I would say the biggest learning thing was just like being really vulnerable about sharing my own writing. I think when you're a performer, you're kind of hiding. In a way, you definitely have to be very vulnerable to be a good performer, I think, like in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also like often singing someone else's words, or you're acting as another character or whatever. But when you're writing your own music, even if you're not writing from your point of view, people will assume that you are. And sometimes that can be like really scary. At least for me it was. I was like, when I pulled my this group of musicians together who they're amazing. My bandmates are amazing. I was so nervous the first day because I was like, oh, here's a draft of a couple of my songs. And I was just like, I've just hadn't felt that nervous before, after I've been like performing for a long time. I've been a performing artist for a long time, but I don't really get that nervous. And then when I had to introduce like sketches of my own songs and my lyrics, I was like, oh my God, this is so terrifying. So that was like I think for me, that was like the big internal thing to get over. But then once things got going and they started playing around and we were all brainstorming together on the arrangements and stuff, that's when it just got so rewarding and exciting.
Awesome. And how long's the band been together?
Let me see. I feel like it was around 2016. Oh, I'm so bad at dates, but like the end of 2016 is probably when or was it 2017? It's one of those.
Mm-hmm.
So bad at those. When I reached out to the different bandmates, and a couple of them the drummer, he was also a drummer in Mad Noise, the previous band that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And he was on board right away. And then the bassist, I'd actually had him in mind, like I'd wanted to play or work on a project with him for a long time. And then I kind of nervously reached out and was like, hey, I really like your playing, are you interested in this project? It involves like, here's a sample of some of the music, and there's a lot of world building and storytelling and characters and stuff, and it's a little bit nerdy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was super down. And then Andrea, she also sings and she plays keys. We sang together prior in like a jazz ensemble for a couple of years, and that's how we got to know each other. And we were we bonded over like singing extremely difficult harmonies and
Mm-hmm.
like really hard intervals and stuff together. And then Eli, the violinist, he's been a really long time collaborator of mine. We've done theater together since college days and have played music, and yeah, he was quick to play as well.
Awesome. So I think right now is a perfect time to ask, where does the band name come from? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, so Girl Swallows Nightingale, it has a lot of meanings for me. The original like combination of the words came when I was reading the story. It's a Greek myth, and it's about this princess named Philomela. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but she basically she gets raped in the palace by a prince who and no one is on her side, and she goes in at night with her handmaiden and they cut off his head, and of course they've killed him, so they have to flee the palace, and they're chased out of the palace, and they run out, and then they get turned into a swallow and a nightingale. Like the gods take pity on them, and they transform them into a swallow and a nightingale. And so I was reading this, and I was just like really moved by this story, and I just kind of saw the combination of the words side by side, and then I turned one into a verb, and so that's like the origin of when I just put the words together.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's not just a sad story to me. It's like there's like I'm a big fantasy and fan, and like I draw from a lot of folklore, I draw from mythology. I'm very inspired by these things, and so it has like on the one side you can read the title has a kind of that fantastical connotation to it,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also like ingestion and something a little bit painful involved. Maybe it's slightly grotesque in a way, and I feel like a lot of my writing and the things that I'm drawn to are about painful elements that maybe you have to eat or you have to take in, but then you have to like process them and transform them into something that's beautiful or creative, or it's kind of like you're taking things in and you're sending them out in hopefully a better form, but you still have to take what life gives you, that kind of a meaning. And yeah, so that's like the origin of the name. I like that it's also like slightly suggestive if you read it in that way as well, and it's like powerful sounding to me.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
On a side note, there's a band out of Kalispell, Montana that I think you'd actually really love.
Okay.
It's a band called Wizard, Wizzerd.
Okay.
They're like a death metal band, but they are 100% influenced by like Magic the Gathering. They're like all their music tells like a story, and they're last time I talked to them, they were actually working on like building a series of books telling the story of the band in this fantasy world.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'll definitely be into it.
Yeah. And that like when we originally worked with them, we were doing a interview with them, and I asked them where their name came from, and they had this whole story about how they channeled their inner beings, and it was just a really interesting story. And it's like, oh yeah, that's like what we tell everybody, because that's the that's the character. But yeah, so definitely check them out. I think you'd absolutely love it.
Cool. And how do you spell that again?
Wizzerd.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds very, very cool.
Just a little side note before we go make a complete left turn into a complete subject change. So you'd mentioned this before, that you're multidisciplinary. I know you also make films, correct?
Yes, that's actually nowadays like pretty much my bread and butter is working in filmmaking, mostly as a director and a producer. And yeah, that's what I do every day.
Awesome.
Yeah, I do a lot of video journalism. I'll do corporate type of work. I also make my own creative films, like narrative films. I'm in the middle, actually, while making the album. It was just very crazy last year, like a marathon year. While making the album, I was also producing my first feature-length film, and that was all around the same time. It was madness, but it was like all the timing, and there's scheduling for all these big amounts of people, and it was just like, what, I have this opportunity, I'm just gonna make it happen. So yeah, just I really have like both of my feet like equally in both worlds, in visuals and music. And I even do music videos for my other friends out here who are musicians, and I just try to cross-pollinate resources and friends and people who work on both sides, and be like, hey, you need help each other out, because it's tough to be a musician. It's tough to be a filmmaker, and a lot of the things that we do, like, we can be creative together instead of just like isolating ourselves. So
awesome. And if you don't mind, we're going to go down this road a little bit further, because this is obviously something that I can 100% relate to, because obviously with the live and amplified thing, we do a lot of video work. And then I'd mentioned before we come on here, I work for the news side of things, and I do a lot of their creative services stuff. So this is
nice.
yes, I love music, but this is my passion. So I'm going to kind of take this ride with you for a little bit. What got you into film?
The Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
And many, many movies, but I would say like the behind the scenes, like, collector's box that Peter Jackson put together, that kind of behind the scenes documentary stuff about making the films. Like those were my Bible. Like I didn't know anything about, my family, like we're poor people. Like I didn't have a camera. I didn't have any of those things, like, but just watching and learning about the world building aspect is, those are the crucial things you need to know about being a director for anything, whether you're like, creating a modern day gritty drama or something crazy high fantastical. You have to like understand, world building in some way. And so that was so inspiring to me as a kid. And I loved that teamwork aspect of it, that all these people came together for a bigger vision. And so that was probably the most influential on like just me knowing that I wanted to be a storyteller of some kind. It didn't have to be film, but I wanted to tell stories. And other films that I was really crazy about was like Annie Kurosawa film. I'm half Japanese, and I grew up watching like a lot of his movies over and over and over again, like the Seven Samurai, and obviously like any Miyazaki movie I was a huge fan of. So, but yeah, primarily like, okay, Lord of the Rings and Peter Jackson, just that whole behind the scenes stuff is what made me really excited about being a storyteller, but also with a team and that shared like camaraderie that you have.
Yep. And do you primarily do like fiction, more narrative stuff, or have you dabbled in like documentary filmmaking at all?
Yeah, I've one of my regular gigs is actually I'm a video producer for California Magazine,
Okay.
which is UC Berkeley's alumni publication.
Hmm.
And I've done a lot of short documentary films for them, covering entomologists, covering divers, covering paleontologists, kind of any type of topic that is somehow connected to UC Berkeley, then I've gone in and made little short films. Usually they're kind of character driven documentary stories.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then right now I'm working on a piece about brain machine interfaces. I'm also working on this narrative, like, fictional feature film with, a lot of my really good friends. And I've made a couple of fantasy, like complete fantasy short films. And yeah, so kind of whatever I'm really inspired by at the time is what I go for.
Awesome. Yeah, I got my start doing short, like fictional things. And then for the last, I'd say almost 4 or 5 years, I've been focusing pretty heavy on a few documentary projects that I've
Cool.
been wanting to do, and my dad's been wanting me to do. So I kind of dove headfirst into those and spent the last 5 years or so like really just laying the groundwork. And now I'm kind of at a point where I can sit down and take what I've shot and lay out the story for a few different projects.
That's really exciting. Yeah. So, and those are like kind of more on a personal angle, or are they?
One one of them's more of a personal one of them's more personal because I just kind of give you a little bit of background on it. When when my dad was first starting his career as a pilot, he was hired by this guy that was in town locally, and he used to be a famous race car driver. And he was actually the last person to win the Daytona 500 when they were racing on the beach back in like the 50s. And
Wow.
so my dad had been telling me for years that I needed to get him on camera and just let him speak. And it took about 10 years before my dumb brain said, "Oh, hey, your dad's smart. You should listen to him." And about 2 years ago, I went up there during like right after Thanksgiving, actually, and sat down with him for almost 2.5 hours. Um, and I got a lot of really good stuff. And once I got him on tape, it opened up doors for other people to start talking. And so it's been a fun ride for the last 2 years or so doing that project.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I'm excited about it. I can't wait to really get into the editing process and see how the story comes out. But I did just make my first swing at coming back over to doing like more fictional stuff. I signed up for a film shootout, like, one of those 48-hour film shootout type deals.
Yeah.
So I figured if because I've really been wanting to do more fictional stuff. So I figured that was my opportunity to kind of see if it's something that I still like doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been doing a lot of like promotional videos. So, like my career my career trajectory has really changed since I came out of college doing a lot of like fictional things, and I wanted to take a shot at it and see if it was something I still enjoyed doing.
Yeah, you have to, if you have the urge, I feel like you got to at least try it because it's there, and you kind of, that's what's so exciting about like sitting down and making something is you never really know where it's going to go, and you're just trying to be like as honest with where it should go as possible, and it's just this like discovery process that
Mm-hmm.
is kind of so addicting. And that's cool that you've been working on trying to find, get back into it.
Mm-hmm. And then, like you, I kind of grew up very similarly, where I wasn't allowed to listen to a lot of the popular music, and so I kind of got this affinity for listening to music that I shouldn't be listening to, because it was kind of, it was like breaking the law, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then so that's how I got introduced to music. And then I started doing film, and then this opportunity to do live and amplified came together, and it was like, hey, mixing two things that I really enjoy, kind of like yourself. It's awesome when two things kind of come together like that.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's very cool.
Yeah. But so how do you kind of balance your time between film and music?
Man, I don't have balance. uh yeah, I feel like, everyone has to find their own way of what makes it work, what works best for them. um for me, I really like to take a deep dive into a thing for a few days instead of trying to like do a couple hours of this a day and a couple hours of that a day. It's like I just block out, no, this is my week where I'm working on this. And that's kind of how like film production is too. You're pretty much like blacked out for these shooting days or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so for music, when I'm writing, I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna make, Tuesday, I'm just gonna be working on music. And that helps me just reach that flow that I need to get creative, and turning off notifications and all of that stuff. I Yeah, it's kind of like big blocks of time that I try to devote to things, as opposed to, I'm going to do 1 hour of this every day and 2 hours of that every day. And, I just do a deep dive into projects as much as I can.
And that makes sense. Like sometimes, because I feel like I'm the same way actually. Like I'll have like 3 projects And it's like, okay, I have to work on this. And then when I get to a point here, I can go work on, like, it's very, yeah, I understand where you're coming from on that one.
Yeah, and I think like it's just hard to like just turn, sometimes I really do get stuck on one and I just need to go work on something else for a while because
Mm-hmm.
my brain's like, okay, you need a break, go work on something else.
Yep.
um it does get really crazy. Like the struggle is so real. Like everyone who is a freelancer or runs their own business, or which is being a musician, is running your own business.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it is hard to manage, all these different projects and scheduling people and all of that. So it definitely like does its good wear and tear and all of that. But sometimes like, I just have to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
then I try to find a time where I can just kind of crash and recuperate and stuff. Um,
You know, you said something very interesting in there. And I think it's something that people need, or musicians in general need to kind of wrap their head around. And it's treating music like a business.
yeah.
Because I think sometimes it, they get, they find that I feel like sometimes musicians get into the industry for the wrong reason and they take everything personally. But if they treat it like a business and it's like, okay, I'm going here because it's going to cover this bill or like whatever it is, if they treat it more business aspect, I think they'll find more enjoyment in the things that they do, musically speaking.
Yeah, and for like I don't want to like give anybody advice. I could just speak to like what I've found has worked for me. Like for me, for a long time I was really doing the gig thing. Like that's when I was in a lot of other bands and I was like, I was playing a lot of other people's music and I was gigging a lot, and that was how I was making money. And on top of like, also building myself up as a freelance filmmaker and videographer and stuff, like doing all of that. And then there was one point where I just really did a deep like soul search about like, okay, what do I get, what gives me the most pleasure from these different art forms that I do? Why do I need them? And for me, I realized that I get a lot more pleasure out of creating original music and performing like my own music as opposed to performing like any kind of music. And if I was, but with film, like I actually feel like, I of course love working on my passion project films, as you would, but I also get like a good amount of professional joy out of taking someone else's idea and executing a vision and just working in that way professionally. And when I realized that, I was like, okay, you know what, I'm going to shift. I'm going to focus on like actually making the majority of my income come through like film and video. That way I could actually save more of my resources towards like, I guess what I call a pure project, which is like
Mm-hmm.
an art project that to me doesn't have like your um like I guess that tie, that personal, or that this pressure to where like, oh, if I don't sell this many records, that is equivalent to how I'm going to value myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I needed to create Girl Swallows Nightingale as like this pure project where, I treat it where it's like, if you're going to invest in a business, you're gonna have to go in the red for an amount of time, and you need to build a really strong foundation. And then, but in order to give it that time, I was like, all right, I'm going to shift, try to make my money through film, try to get a really strong foundation for this band going, make sure I get the music produced in the way that I want it to be. I don't have like, I know that I'm not going to make back in the first year everything that I've put into it. And
Mm-hmm.
understanding that it is like that business, like you're not gonna you know, don't just get totally destroyed that you don't make everything back on your first tour, right? It takes like a
Mhm.
couple tours to do that. And so just understanding that element of like starting a project, that it is also a business, and then that gives you, yeah, this kind of healthy separation about like, okay, if it doesn't get received in a certain way, it's like, at least I know it's like pure, it's from my heart, it's from our, like, we were really honest in how we put it together.
Mm.
But again, that's just like my situation. And you know, people who are totally making all of their money as a musician and having to tour all the time, like that's a whole nother way of life as well, and that's really difficult. And I don't like have advice for anyone, I'm just explaining like how I've managed right now. I will say one thing, that I had a big breakthrough really just in the last, like, kind of prepping for this album release and putting my visuals together and everything. One of my bandmates, she's a professional marketer, and like as her day job, and she really kind of inspired me. Like, I used to, as a musician, or you know, when every time I'm putting something out, I would just dread the marketing side and the social media side, and just be like, ugh, like I put so much work into making this, and now I hate this side of it. I just want to move on to my next project, you know? And she really talked about marketing as storytelling. And when I thought of it that way, I thought about like, you know, you can really tell a story through how you're telling people about your music, visually or literally, or however, but think of it as storytelling. And also, if you spend, you know, a year making your precious baby, like we always talk about as artists, like, oh, we're creating this baby, it's my art baby, right?
Mhm.
If you had a child, you wouldn't just put it out on the street after you have it, right? Oh, hey,
Sure.
go live your life.
Yep.
You know, you need to create, you need to really plan ahead, be patient, and plan ahead and create a wonderful nursery, put food in there, put all these things in there so that your art baby can really have a life on its own after you release it. It doesn't just like, blah.
Yep.
So once I thought of it that way, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually excited to work on planning the marketing
Mhm.
for, you know, the next 6 months, as opposed to being like, ugh,
Yep.
gross, social media, I hate this. And
Yep.
it is hard, but there's always a couple hours of like, you know, bitch work or whatever
Yep.
that you have to do on any job, and
Yep.
just slot away an hour of that and figure out what are the best practices, what can I do. Or maybe you know, you find someone that can help you, and just, yeah, just try to, my attitude changed a lot. And once I changed my attitude towards it and just be like, all right, I'm going to learn how to do this, it made me happier.
Mhm. I I actually came to a similar conclusion a few years back because I had been doing a lot of film work where people would just put all this effort building this project, either musically or film or through film, and they release it and just let it sit there, like, and they
Hmm.
were already on to the next project. And it's like, and I mean, I'm guilty of it too. Like, I can't sit here and say, oh, I've never done that. But that's when I was younger, and it's like I didn't know any better. And it's like, how, and you reiterating that is like, how can you put all this work and effort just to let the project sit on SoundCloud or on YouTube and not do anything with it, or like give it an initial push, and then because it didn't do anything, it's, yeah.
Yeah, and I totally empathize with everyone, and I struggle with it every day, and it's so much work. And but I think, like, you know, I'm just wanting to be the best artist that I can be and make the best life for this project in the future, because that's like all my bandmates work and their time too, and it's like I feel like I'm failing them if I'm not pushing it after something is released too, because that's all their work too. So yeah, it's hard though. Like it's not easy at all, but at least when I had that breakthrough mentally about like, okay, I need to create a future for this, or at least like try and build a foundation for something, so that, and just be patient too. It's like that's why I don't like shows like American Idol, or like, these kind of quick rise to fame type of things, because so many people who are successful, they've been working at their craft for decades, and it's not like anyone who, no, people work on their craft for decades and decades, and that no one can take that away from you. No one can take, that work that you've put into something and that dedication. And you just have to, it's perseverance.
Absolutely. So you're currently based in Oakland. Are you born, raised in Oakland, or did you move there?
So I was born in LA when I was 4 years old. My family moved to Wyoming, and I lived in Wyoming until I was about 13 or 14. And then we went back to Antelope Valley area in Palmdale, which is north of LA. I went there for high school, and then I came out to the Bay Area and went to UC Berkeley for college. And then like the Bay Area just kind of became my home base. And then after I did some traveling, I lived in the Middle East for a while. I lived in Russia, and then I came back, and then I settled in Oakland, and I've been in Oakland for like 7 or 8 years now.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I saw on your Facebook page that you had all these different, or that you spoke a few different languages, and that you'd studied at the Russian Federation Acting Academy, I think is what it was called, or something. And I was trying to piece all that together, and so I figured it was a good opportunity to bring it up.
Yeah, I always loved traveling, and actually probably inspired by my mom, because my mom came to America from Japan when she was 18, and she always knew like she wanted to come, and she loved American music. Actually, that's kind of like why she came originally. And she had always told me that the reason she really was able to speak English was because she stayed, like she had other Japanese friends who came, but they all went home. They all went home after like, 6 months or something to visit family. And she said, no, I stayed in America for a year, and I just wouldn't leave to just get the language like stuck in my head. And so I always knew that when, I grew up, I wanted to like go abroad, and I wanted to stay in another country and like not go back home for at least a year until I like drilled a language into my head. And so I ended up going to live in the West Bank in Palestine, and I studied Arabic there, and lived there and learned Arabic. And and then that was like I took a year off in the middle of college, and I went there. So that was the first like deep dive into a language. And then I came back to Berkeley, and I was doing Russian. I was actually doing comparative literature in Russian and Arabic. And then I've always been like obsessed with Russian literature and Russian music and their dance. It's just like such a fascinating history and kind of political, and these relationships between politics and power and religion and art is so fascinating and tumultuous. And so that's why I got into Russian. And then I thought, well, after school, I'm just going to go get more performing arts training in Russia. So I went to Russia on I had like $300. I literally, I gave away a bunch of stuff, and I paid enough for my tuition. And then I like went over there and I trained. It was all in Russian. I was going to this theater academy every day, and it was just like, it was like ninja school for performing artists. It was so intense. And then I didn't have much money at all, so I like actually bought a guitar on a credit card, and then I busked and I played music on the street.
Oh,
and and I just like, yeah, I was at the Performing Arts Academy, like, and I was there for a semester and just became like a better artist, honestly. And then after that, I sold the guitar like for cash, and then that got me my like transportation to the airport, and then I came home.
oh wow, that's awesome. So, what was the experience like busking on the streets of Russia? I'm very curious about that now.
Yeah, well, a few things. It was very cold.
Uh-huh.
And that sucked. But the funny part was that actually a lot of people like they're like, oh, poor thing, because they're say like, oh, девушка, что ты делаешь? They're like, oh, what are you doing here, you pretty little girl? And they feel bad for you, because in the Bay Area, like, it's sunny and it's like, it's fun, like people appreciate buskers,
Mhm.
and they like, but over there, if you're busking, they assume that you like are an alcoholic, or you,
Oh.
so so I had people like, people definitely like would drop money and stuff and enjoy it, but then a lot of like, I actually had people drop like bottles of alcohol into the guitar case. And I had some people invite me over, like, hey, come and drink with us, or hey, come party, like, and I did get stopped by the police at one point, and I just kind of played off the like, an American, I didn't understand your rules, I'm a cute
Yeah.
little American girl, and I had my hair in braids, and I look more Asian when I put my bangs down, so I put my bangs down, and then
That's
they'd be like, okay, that's fine. But yeah, it was a good time, a crazy time. But I learned so much. I had these amazing instructors there, and I was just living in a whole building full of artists, from opera singers to to actors to musicians to these are just like Russians really are intense about the arts. Like, they want your soul or get out of my class, like that
yep.
type of situation. And I just really loved it. And the performing arts, I don't have to speak a really high level of Russian to be doing it. So I'm definitely like conversational, but not, I couldn't give a lecture or anything. And yeah, I learned so much and made some really, really dear friends, and they're all off like in these different Russian theater companies, or doing, being performers, and they just have like this sense of respect and dedication for the arts. It's not this like of course there's a commercial side to it too, but if you're in the academy, they're not asking you like, people don't assume that you're just trying to be famous. And I feel like in America, if you're a performing artist, people are like assuming that you're doing it because you want to be famous, and there's just this inherent connection there in the US, whereas in Russia it's a lot more like, oh, you're trying to be an artist, that's
Yep.
cool, as opposed to, oh, you're trying to be famous. Like, sure, everyone wants like success and prosperity and potentially fame, but like, people just assume that in America. And I really appreciated that attitude in Russia. And it gives you just kind of a groundedness about, why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard? Like, what does art mean to me? And what is it doing for me on the inside? Like, why am I doing this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what we've talked about a lot of what you've done in the past and what you're currently working on. Where do you ultimately want to take your music or your band in general?
Yeah. With my band, like I feel like this is just the beginning. All of us have been musicians, like I said, for a long time in other groups or working on other projects, and we've just feel such a strong chemistry with this group, and we're just really proud that this is our first album together, and we've already like written. I've got sketches for what the next album is going to be. We've already like mostly arranged two new songs that will go on the next album. I think like for me, I've always had this ethos of like it's the people first in my team, and I see like, okay, what are the things that all of us are bringing to the table? What are some untapped potentials that different people have? Like I want to see more. One Andrea, for example, she's starting to explore writing songs herself as well, and so we're starting to co-write together and maybe even write more together as a band, not just arrange together as a band. And I just want to like, for me it's like as long as the passion and the inspiration is there, then we'll just keep digging. I'd love to do a few more records with this band, and I go where the intuition is taking me and where the passion is, and I don't put a ton of pressure on my team to, this is where we have to be next year. It's more like, I set a goal and let's just see, like, let's see what we can do with this idea and this little nugget, give it time to kind of play. And yeah, I'd love to do some, eventually when things hopefully settle down, I'd love to do some touring. But I really just want to be making original material with musicians that I love working with. And I also, like I said, I have a whole visual team here in Oakland that I've been working with in film, and I've brought them in to do all the visual collaboration for my band. So I've got original costume design. Like if you see any of our Instagram or anything, I have, we make our visuals, like all the pieces from scratch. And my drummer Mowgli, he's the photographer, and that's his day job, I guess, is like, yeah, he's a professional photographer, and he adds that element. So yeah, we just want to like follow intuition and the creativity, see where it goes, and and set goals and have a really good time. Like it makes me happy. So as long as it keeps making us happy, it's going to be hard, but yeah, that's what I want for us.
Awesome. Are you sorry. Are you working towards a like any music videos for any singles off the album, or?
Yes, definitely. So I have actually like a script that like my original concept was I have these 8 songs on the album, and a lot of the songs I actually wrote the music with the visuals in mind, or some of them I even wrote the visuals first and then I wrote the music after. So I have like I have these characters, and I have a series of short films. They're like short narrative music videos, I guess, that will be accompanying this album, Shapeshifter, and it follows this character, my character who's eating the bird. Her name is Nue, and it's she's a shapeshifter. She's a professional memory reaper, and it follows her story, and I'm shooting those this year, and we've already made a good amount of the costumes, or like midway through that. So the plan for the rest of the year is like shooting these short films and gradually releasing them. And in the meantime, we're already working on music for album 2.
Nice. I was actually just looking through your Instagram as you mentioned it, because I was on your website and I saw you had the little hot link to your Instagram. I really like how your photos are laid out.
Thank you.
Like if you scroll down a little bit and then start scrolling up, how you creep up out of this the crater in the street. That's very nice. It's like, that's awesome.
Thank you.
So obviously that was something that you've planned because what yeah, that's just really like I can't I'm having I'm having a hard time putting words together because it's that awesome.
Yay, everybody check out our Instagram. I'm really proud of this layout. Like
Yeah.
we really spent a lot of time. Like, you know, the photos itself in this crater, like a lot of people are like, are these Photoshop? And it's not. It's literally the place doesn't exist anymore. But a few years ago, there was all these flash floods and in California, and a couple roads were like completely, you know, destroyed. And there's this one road that we found actually just like walking around hiking, and it had been kind of left, and it was sort of an unused road, so they hadn't fixed it. And you had all these plants actually growing into it, and kind of had this beautiful combination of nature and destruction at the same time. And it was just such a so we just shot these photos, and but all the planning, like if you scroll down, there's like all these detailed costume designs and stuff like this. It's been, you know, it's been like at least a year and a half of work just to get these images together. And we only just started releasing them, you know, this year, because of the album got released just a few weeks ago. So
and so just to kind of tease everybody, to give them more of an incentive to come check out this awesome Instagram page. So the characters that are next to, or that are on the outside of the middle row of you creeping out of the crater in the road, do those, I'm assuming those characters have a significant meaning? Are they like...
Yeah. So these images, so I'll describe it for the listener. Basically, I have these archival images actually of these bakemono, which are a certain type of Japanese monster. And it's a class of yokai, which if you're familiar with like anime and stuff, yokai are these are Japanese ghosts, or ghosts really that are all over the world. And bakemono type of monsters, they are shapeshifters. And these images that I was inspired by are these really crazy, ridiculous, sometimes really funny images of these different kinds of monsters, and they're painted in these 18th to 19th century Japanese scrolls. And they're just these really beautiful watercolor paintings of these crazy monsters, and they're all shapeshifters, and there's a story behind each shapeshifter. And you know, none of my characters are directly correlated with any one shapeshifter from this parchment, but I pulled a lot of inspiration, and like the body positioning when we did the photo shoot, like I pulled a lot of inspiration from these old ancient monsters.
Awesome. Beautiful. I must just say though, it's absolutely amazing. And if you're listening to this, you need to check out this Instagram page. It is amazing. A lot of time, I can tell a lot of time and a lot of thought went into it.
Yeah, and while you're there, like you'll see some of the costume design. There's these bones in the design work, and one of our title tracks is called, one of the first singles was called Chimera. And for anyone who doesn't know, Chimera is a monster found in all over the world, all kinds of traditions, and it's basically a hybrid of different kinds of creatures. And so for the Chimera like photo shoot, we created this costume design, and it incorporated bones from all these different animals. We have snake spine, we have seagull bones, and yeah, and I have these two women who are total badass that I work with, and one is a jewelry designer and the other is a costume designer, and the three of us just got together and we're like, all right, how could we create an image that teases a little bit about the character and also represents like the title of the song, which is called Chimera. And so that's how that imagery came out.
Awesome. But yeah, first, I don't want to keep you too much longer because I know it's Friday night, beginning of the weekend. You know, But we've kind of been touching on this the entire time, but I kind of want to ask this question, and I'm going to word it very vaguely just to kind of give you some freedom to go
Okay.
and just kind of take it where you want to take it. But why music?
Hmm. Music for me keeps me like I need it for me. It's something that I need emotionally to stay vulnerable, to stay I guess like open to the world and like I said, I feel like storytelling and the film side of me is like kind of my brain
Hmm.
really figuring out the world. Not that I don't put emotion into it, right? But for me, music, just there's something about like physically releasing sounds from your body that it kind of resets me in a way. I feel like sick if I don't have it. And I just need that for me, for my mental health, for my emotional health, for, yeah, it's like, I think sometimes for me my personality is like, okay, hard things happen and it can really, I can put up these walls, and I know that when you want to be a good performer you have to tear those walls down. Like um you have to be able to be open, be vulnerable in order to be a really great performer. And music always reminds me that. It always reminds me like, hey, put these walls down, like be open, be giving, be sharing. And it just makes me a better person and makes me be more like who I want to be.
Mm.
Yeah. And obviously it's like fun, and I have like so many amazing music friends that I just want to spend time with, and our favorite thing is to just make music. So, yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. That was a perfect way to kind of wrap everything in a nice little bow. Um, so I know everything's kind of up in the air with the coronavirus deal kind of going around, but and you've had to already start rescheduling at least your album release show. But what's the rest of your schedule kind of looking like?
Yeah, so I think like in terms of performances, a lot that stuff is really just up in the air for everyone.
Hmm.
I do have a potential collaboration with a local community orchestra, and we're trying to put together a show potentially where we're having like orchestral arrangements backing up the band, and that would be like a really sick performance.
Hmm.
But I think like the stuff that for sure is going to happen, that doesn't involve performances, I just have a lot more visual stuff to be released because I have like imagery that goes along with every song. Some of it is editorial, like these really fine art photography and poetry that goes along with every song. And I have these short films that will be accompanying the music, and those are going to be, they're getting made and they're getting released like throughout the entire year. So people have a lot to look forward to online from us as well, beyond just like listening to the album. And there's a lot of visual stuff coming out, and we'll probably be doing more live streaming, I'm sure, just as a lot of people are already starting to do.
Hmm.
um, yeah, and just creating new stuff too. So
Awesome. And then where can everybody find you online to see your latest music or your latest video projects?
yeah, everything is at our website, girlswallowsnightingale.com. We're also at Instagram. Everything is there too. That's probably where we're most active, is Instagram actually, at Girl Swallows Nightingale. And then our album is on all the major platforms. So you could look us up on Spotify. You could find us on Bandcamp or Apple. All of those outlets, they're there. But if you're just looking for the one-stop shop, I'd say either, yeah, like Facebook, Instagram, and our website is where we're the most active.
Awesome. Well, Before we wrap it up, I want to thank you one last time for giving me the opportunity to sit here and chat with you. It's been an absolute blast. I, like I mentioned earlier, yeah, I was a little uneasy if I was going to have to reschedule this one again or not because of work-related issues, but we got through it. It was a good conversation, so I'm 100% happy.
Yeah, me too. And I'm really grateful that you thought of us and for the opportunity. Like, music is still going to be, people need music now more than ever. And
Hmm.
I think, wherever people are at in their local communities, just like, I think just help each other out, and support if you do have more stability than someone else, like just see how you can support them. And I think, yeah, we're going to be here giving music and trying to be open and sharing as much as we can too. So
Awesome. But one last time, thank you again so much. Thank you to everybody for tuning in, and we will see you all later.